Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and dive in straight away. Today is October 25th.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I know I say it almost like every day, but I'm amazed. I feel amazed at how quickly winter came and fall departed, and October is nearly gone. And it is kind of a strange phenomena that I think we're in a full-blown winter here. I have no confidence that this is going to depart. It's like, I think that I've been reading the Chronicles of Narnia with Gabe. It feels like it's always winter and never Christmas.
Yep.
Evil has taken a hold of the land.
Oh man.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Oh man. And into that, we're going to be reading about Jesus. Last time, we were seeing how he was performing miracles all over the Galilee, and as he was healing people and dispersing of demons and all this amazing demonstrations of power and gospel, and the presentation of him coming as ushering in this kingdom, this new kingdom reality. Crowds were pretty excited. They started to gather, and the rumors and the discussions of him started to just get widely passed through the area. And with that, turns out not everybody's happy. So this is the confrontation. This confrontation is but the first of many. And in the first confrontation, you might remember from yesterday's reading, came after his friends, he heals someone, and they're like, how can you do that? Why do you think you can say that forgiveness of sins can happen? And he said, well, if you don't think forgiveness of sins is if that's a big deal, well, what about this? Take up your mat and head on out of here, pal. So he heals the guy after forgiving his sins, and now they're like a stick in a hornet's nest. And they confront him, and this confrontation is but the first of many which will take place between Jesus and the religious leaders of his day. By indicating that he has the divine authority to forgive sins, Jesus naturally arouses immediate reaction from the scribes and Pharisees. Since they correctly believe that only God can forgive sins, they reject the possibility that Jesus himself is divine and conclude instead that he's guilty of blasphemy. None of that seems implausible to me. I mean, it's like pretty unlikely that it's God, and we know that only God can do this, so this has to be blasphemy. I kind of get how they get there. In addition to the written law given through Moses, the Pharisees accept as equally binding the oral traditions of the rabbis, which traditions have evolved into a highly ritualistic set of religious observations. So when Jesus and his disciples violate some of these traditional rules, the Pharisees are highly offended. Though through two parables, Jesus tells them that their system is a system of legalistic observation simply will not substitute for true righteousness, which God has always demanded. John alone records what is apparently a brief trip to Jerusalem, where Jesus attends one of the Jewish festivals. Although the exact festival is not indicated, there's strong evidence that it is the Passover of AD 28. Some believe it was Pentecost, or the Festival of Tabernacles. While in Jerusalem, Jesus is once again criticized, this time for healing a man on the Sabbath, the day on which no work is to be done. If there was ever a perfect example of the fallacy of legalism, surely this was it. This is it. They indicate the incident also raises some fundamental questions. What is at stake? The law itself, or only interpretation of the law? Under what circumstances, if any, may the letter of the law be disregarded in favor of higher concerns consisting of the spirit of the law? Does Jesus consider the law given through Moses only to be binding upon his disciples, given through Moses to be binding upon his disciples? These very legitimate questions are clearly on the minds of the religious establishment. Again, I kind of understand their tension. And despite the growing opposition, Jesus continues to go about teaching and performing miracles. Yet, almost consciously, without fanfare, as if to underscore the urgency of his mission in the face of opposition. Jesus appoints 12 of his disciples as specially chosen apostles to aid him in his ministry. Now, keep in mind that he had many, maybe 100 some disciples that were following him as the rabbi at this point, but he calls these 12 apostles and kind of gives them the authority to go do some ministry. And with their added support, Jesus continues to attract even greater crowds from among the common people. Once again, Jesus set out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to the disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. They said to him, John's disciples often fast and pray, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees. But yours are like party animals, eating and drinking. Jesus answered, Can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them. In those days, they will fast. He told them this parable. No one tears a piece of out of a new garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskin. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skin, and the wine will run out, and the wineskin will be ruined. No new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, wants the new, for they say the old is better.
Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, Do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Then Jesus said to him, Get up, pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Now the day on which this took place was a Sabbath, and so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. But he replied, The man who made me well said to me, Pick up your mat and walk. So they asked him, Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk? The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Jesus gave them this answer. Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, and he will show him even greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives life to whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Very truly I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life. Very truly I tell you, a time is coming and has now come when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to judge, because he is the Son of Man.
Do not be amazed at this, for the time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear the voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise and live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just. For I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. There is another who testifies in my favor, and I know that his testimony is about me is true. You have sent to John, and he has testified to the truth. Not that I accept human testimony, but I mention it that you may be saved. John was a lamp that burned and gave light, and you chose for a time to enjoy his light. I have testimony weightier than that of John. For the works that the Father has given me to finish, that very work that I am doing, testify that the Father has sent me. And the Father who sent me has himself testified concerning me. You have never heard his voice nor seen his form, nor does his word dwell in you, for you do not believe the one he has sent. You study the scriptures diligently because you think that in them you will have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me. Yet you refuse to come to me and to have life. I do not accept glory from human beings, but I know you. I know that you do not have the love of God in your hearts. And I've come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. But if someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. How can you believe, since that you accept the glory from one another, but do not seek the glory that comes from the only God? But do not think I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, on whom your hopes are set. If you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he who wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe what I say? At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some of the heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." He answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law of the priests on the Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath, and yet are innocent? I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. If you have known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." On the other Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching, and a man there who was not right, and a man there whose right hand was shriveled.
The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, stand up in front of everyone. Then Jesus asked them, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed, and their stubborn hearts said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idum, and the regions across the Jordan and around Tyre and Sidon. Because the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him, to keep the people from crowding him. For he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, you are the Son of God. But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, the one I love, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory. In his name the nations will put their hope. One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coastal regions around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all.
Such is our reading for today. I know for some technical reasons, Linfield, you need to head out to the Aiken campus straight away. But before you do you have any comments that you want to make about what was read?
I was just, it's just amazing that Jesus, and I put down, in the chat, this is a mic drop moment. It really is. It's Jesus establishing his authority on earth in front of these religious leaders that at that time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were the top of their political groups. And the Pharisees were all about the law. The Sadducees were all about keeping the law, and they were the rich political group, and so they wanted to keep their power. And Jesus is now coming against them, and it's a pretty amazing thing that what Jesus did on those Sabbath days, where it was so ritual and so legalistic, and he's like, this isn't what it's about. And how he established his deity on the earth during that time, so we can see him establishing who the Son of God is, who God is himself, the Son of God, and soon we'll see him establish the Holy Spirit. And so this whole Trinity is coming to form. So there's my thoughts in a quick nutshell.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Go and get ready for the day.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Bye.
See you, Linfield.
Piggybacking on what Linfield was just sharing, one of the thoughts that struck me was how Jesus coming in this moment does something that's very unique. I mean, had religiosity been enough, had being religious been enough, had doing it right, had somehow getting it done right been enough, this is the worst time to come, because in the Jewish history that we've read, they've never done it better than it was being done right now by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians and some of these groups of zealots. I mean, they were impassioned to try to follow the law. They were impassioned to try to get it right. And they were keeping track of every jot, notation and tittle. They were paying attention to every tithe and a lot of them, they were zealous for the text, and yet they were missing the point completely. And so there is a really unique contrast in the moment that's being accentuated through the person of Christ. And not only that, I mean, just as a nuanced aside, language has never been richer than in this moment when Jesus came. And I look back and I think, and possibly it was never richer up until then, and has never been as rich since then. And so to be able to capture some of the elements of who Christ was never better able to be written than in this day. So really remarkable. Observations that you two gentlemen made about the text?
Mark, can you scroll back up to the prophecy? They're just toward the end where the prophecy was. What was foretold about
Isaiah.
And that in whom I love and I delight. He will not quarrel or cry out. One of the things that strikes me with Jesus when he has these exchanges with with the religious leaders of the day, if these things were happening today, we would see shouting matches and someone trying to get over the top of the other one, and I love the way that Jesus frames his responses in questions that you simply can't answer without totally destroying your own theology, right? So it's like, okay, fine. So which one of you, here's the deal. Your lamb falls into the well. What are you going to do? You tell me you're not going to, you're really not going to take and do something about that? And that the fact that they can't answer, they refuse to answer because everyone knows what the answer is going to be. And that answer completely destroys what they've been talking about. I love that about him. And time again, he does that, but it's looking at that. He will not quarrel. I'm not going to argue with you. Listen, here's the deal.
And don't
Awesome.
you love that the motif that he's bringing is not a power over kingdom, but a power under kingdom. There's not a lack of power. It's power under control, and it's power that's designed to elevate, and in particular those who are hurting and broken. And
Right.
and it's just, it's really remarkable. The Gospels are really remarkable. Jacob, what did you see?
Well, I see Jesus. He's echoing the words of Samuel here as well, but in a slightly different way. And this kind of ties into what both of you are saying as well. In Samuel, you hear obedience is better than sacrifice, and this is what the different audiences of which Jesus is talking to. That's their main goal. Why are you not obeying what the law is saying? Why are you eating in an improper way out in the fields? Why and what Todd was saying as well, why are you working on the Sabbath? And what he is saying is mercy is better than sacrifice, and that mercy is what he is bringing. And so those two different little snippets just really stuck out to me, and how Jesus is bringing a kingdom of which that you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, and the rules that you have created for yourself. These are the same shackles that are binding you from doing the very work and the very things of which the Almighty is asking. So those are a little bit of what stood out to me today.
Wow. No little things, by the way.
No.
No little things. All right. What is the danger that we face when we befriend non-Christians? Likewise, what will happen if we never reach out to those who are outside the church? There's a benefit and a fear. There's a concern and for what happens when we do, and there's a concern for what might happen if we don't. What are those concerns for you, fellas?
This is a question that was recently presented to me within the last month or so, and there's definitely consequences, positive, negative, on both end. I tend to think more often of separation from culture, or separation from people which desperately need to hear the words of the gospel, and not necessarily in a manner that's a forceful or anything like that. But I think befriending people that are not Christians is important. But there's also scripture that will say, do not desire to be around evil men or to do the things that they're doing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want to, be a light in a dark place. So this is something that the Christian church has been wrestling with since its conception. How did the original founding fathers and the first century church deal with these types of things? I mean, they were immersed in a society where you couldn't own land, you couldn't buy anything, you couldn't be a part of commerce, you couldn't own a business unless you worshiped the gods, and they were able to navigate these types of things, but still honor everyone and honor God. So when we befriend non-Christians, or when we befriend people that are not in the faith, or we befriend people that claim to be Christians but are not in any way practicing, the things of which would proclaim that type of a faith, I think it's just simply that we really need to guard and protect our heart in a very serious way, so we do not have a root of bitterness that grows up with inside of us, or we do not partake in those types of things. But in that same way, disconnection completely of relationship, that just can't happen. Otherwise, how would the gospel be spread? So it's just that, like most things in life, a very fine fulcrum, a very careful balance needs to take place, and therefore one must pay the most careful attention to these types of things, so that we may protect and guard ourselves, guard our hearts, guard our minds, but simultaneously be able to love people, love our neighbors as ourselves, and spread the gospel.
Todd, what do you think?
I think that's an incredible answer, Jacob, because Mark, you oftentimes talk about tension between things, and this is a really good example of that. And Jacob, when you use that term fulcrum and finding that balance point, I agree. I think that's really what it is how will they hear if no one tells them? Well, and how are you going to tell them if you don't spend time with them? But you also said something about professing Christians. And I think we see that a lot. Yeah. Oh, I'm a Christian. And I think oftentimes, maybe the response, if not outwardly, people might think, oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
and then their behaviors can be judged negatively, right?
Yeah, but by no means is that accusatory. It's just or negative or anything like that. It's just you can't help it through observation.
And
Yep.
our actions are being watched, aren't they?
Well, and I would say to that, welcome to the journey north. You know, I mean, the reality is that we're a mixed bag. I mean, you know, it's like you know, there's certain danger when the very strategy that is employed, that I've employed, I'll just own it, that I've employed, is to say, particularly the weekend, we're going to strategize the weekend to have our arms wide open to make an environment so that people that are far from God have an access to the opportunity to engage God. That we got our arms wide open to that. That at any given moment, people gather in that are on all sorts of different places on their spiritual journey, and it's not a church that has elite Marine frontline it's not the 12. We're not the 12 disciples, apostles here. We're a group of people that are far from God, that are struggling in faith, that are wildly unconnected to one another, that are seeking to sort out faith in the midst of our story. And sometimes we're just being brought along by wives or husbands that are more passionate than us, or that want their kids to experience something that they experience. You know, there's just this myriad of people, and everybody walks in with the tendency to believe that the person sitting next to them is exactly where they are in their pursuit of God, or their hunger for God, or their pursuit of politics, and their desire for rightness, and whatever sliver of the lane we think we're in. We have a tendency to believe lots of people are in that exact same sliver. And that is just not who's next to you. We have people all over the map. So if you want to be friends with sinners, you maybe just get to be friends with the person at the next chair, and you might just have achieved your goal. You don't always have to look too far. But I love the fact that Jesus is known to be a friend of sinners. That there's an intentionality. You don't get that distinction as a rabbi in Jerusalem in this first century, in this early emergence of this kingdom. You don't get that designation unless you're attempting to befriend sinners, to befriend people who are far from God. So there's a crazy tendency, though, that I see, where we tend to befriend people who are far from God, and we give up the very things that cause life in our hearts. And that's the tension, is that, you know, you don't want to abandon faith for the sake of the sinner. That's not the goal. The goal is to be a light into a dark place. And how does that work? Why do some people care more about keeping certain religious rules than they do about developing meaningful relationships with Jesus?
And Mark, when I looked at that, I was thinking about if you go back to the Jewish leaders, and probably even today we've got examples of this, where if I follow the rituals and if I do the actions, it doesn't matter where my heart is at. I just have to do the stuff.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at, what does a relationship involve? It involves a level of commitment. It involves a level of relinquishing. I mean, if I'm gonna have a relationship with Jesus, I've got to relinquish certain things over to Him. I've got to open up to Him. Whereas if I simply have to go through certain rituals, I can do them without thinking after a while. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be invested in them. I just have to do them, and then I'm fine.